Welcome to this edition of Night Shift. Eric Lopez alongside Bryson Turner. Coming up, UCF Baseball is in the NCAA Tournament. We'll break down the regional as they're in a place that's quite familiar to UCF teams. Tallahassee. We'll break that down and the keys for this weekend's regional. Plus, some big results in track and field and some good honors over at golf. That's all coming up on this edition of Night Shift. Check out blackandgoldbanneret.com. You got a article on the UCF baseball postseason, as well as my column on UCF softball and the great dynamic duo of Jada Cody and Shannon Doherty, and much more on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Go to the YouTube channel. You can see all the media availability reaction from UCF baseball as they found out they're in the NCAA tournament. That's on our YouTube channel as well. All right, Bryson, let's get to it. Monday, of course, the big day. UCF baseball gets into the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2017. Hard to believe that is the case for baseball, but that is what they are. They get in. They will be the 3 seed. They'll take on Alabama. The Crimson Tide is the 2 seed. That'll be a 6 o'clock game on ESPN Plus on Friday. Florida State, who's the national number 8 seed, will take on Stetson. That will be a noon game on ACC Network. The Hatters of Stetson, the ASUN champions, against the Seminoles, and Link Jarrett in the head coach in his second year. UCF, what was noteworthy, was one of the last 4 teams in the field, which certainly caught some people off guard. But now, Bryson, let's kind of begin with your reaction when you saw the bracket come out and UCF going to Tallahassee to take on Alabama, and then obviously Stetson there as the 4 seed with Florida State's the national host. What was your reaction?
Honestly, we've kind of talked about the fact that baseball looked like it was going to Tallahassee. That seemed to be the most likely situation. Sure, they probably could have flown somewhere else, as some other projections leading up to today have shown. But I think that it just seemed right that Tallahassee was the place for the place for UCF to go. They were able to bus there. There's the baked-in storyline in there of Rich Wallace facing off against his old boss, Link Jarrett, who's the head coach of FSU. I think the biggest reaction I feel like that I had from today, which we're recording this on Memorial Day after the selection show, is the fact that UCF was one of the last 4 in. Because we were talking after the Big 12 tournament, and we felt like after UCF beat Cincinnati and Oklahoma State in the first game, that they were handily in the tournament. But to see that they were one of the last 4 in tells us like, oh, wow, maybe we weren't as assured an NCAA tournament spot as we thought. And considering that they left TCU out and how high they were ranked in the KPI ranking, it makes me think like, wow, was UCF in the tournament before they arrived in Arlington? Like, were they projected in by the committee? So it's just a very interesting perspective to really think about, and it makes you realize just how important those Big 12 tournament games ended up being.
No doubt. You look at UCF going to I think everybody knew they needed to get a win or 2 in the Big 12 tournament. I think the surprise was once they beat Oklahoma State, you thought, they're good. They're in the semifinal. They're going to be in. Well, they're in, but they still were last 4 team in, which very eerily, ironic, spooky, whatever adjective you want to use. It's very similar to softball. What happened in a lot of ways.
Well, here's the difference, though, between baseball and softball, which, by the way, you and I are over the moon about how they seem to actually both be doing around the same thing, and they're both good, which is a nuts. But I think the biggest thing with softball is that we knew it was going to come down to the wire with them. We knew it going in, and to the selection show, I mean. With baseball, we had no idea. I think that one really caught us by surprise, I think.
Well, part of it was the experts, D1 Baseball, other outlets, did not have UCF as a last 4 in after the Oklahoma State victory. The team that was in the last 4 in was Florida. And if you notice, Bryson, when they officially announced the last 4 in, Florida was nowhere to be found. Florida was comfortably in. It was UCF that was the last four in, and it's been proven that there was a committee member, an AD at Florida, that's part of the committee, and I think that helped Florida hurt UCF. And I think that's why UCF ended up being the last four in baseball. And it's no different than what happened with UCF softball. UCF softball, I think, should not have been a last four team in. But what happened was FAU got in ahead of UCF because the committee had a bunch of mid-major administrators and coaches that favored the little guy, and they bumped FAU over UCF. So that's why UCF was the last four in softball and not in as well as in baseball, but certainly in softball, because even though UCF had better metrics, stronger schedule strength, and head-to-head win over FAU somehow got the benefit of the doubt by the committee. I think the same thing happened in baseball. UCF baseball has better metrics than Florida baseball, but because the Florida has some, an SEC influence in the committee, Florida got the benefit of the doubt and not being the last four in, whereas UCF was. And so as a result, you have both baseball and softball as 3 seeds, both going to Tallahassee. Both are going against teams from the state of Alabama. Softball went up against Auburn. Baseball is going up against Alabama. Against Alabama, where softball went up against Auburn. And both were last four in when maybe they shouldn't have been, but they were in that regard. So you're right. I think the baseball side was a little bit more of a surprise, but going into that tournament, we thought they could be a last four in, first four out. We just thought that the Oklahoma State game clinched it. It did not. And what's wild is they're in, but TCU is not. Cincinnati's not. Those are 2 Big 12 teams that are among the first 4 out. TCU is kind of a controversial one because not necessarily UCF head-to-head. They didn't play. But TCU beat Kansas State, Bryson, 2 out of 3 in the regular season, and then beat Kansas State in the Big 12 tournament, and yet the committee picks Kansas State over TCU. That's what's so fascinating about all this.
Oh, it really is. I think what might have clinched it, and this is and really insane to think about, because if we're obviously the Big 12 tournament isn't the end all be all, but considering how close this ended up being, I'm going to kind of highlight the Big 12 tournament. TCU, you look at the games that they had. TCU lost to Oklahoma, then they ended up losing so they go into the losers bracket. They beat Kansas State, but then they lose to Kansas in the first game, which means Kansas went up against Oklahoma in the semifinal. Compare that to UCF. They beat Cincinnati, but then they beat Oklahoma State, who was the top team in their half of the bracket. So TCU did not do that, while UCF did. And UCF ended up beating the eventual Big 12 champion in Oklahoma State. So I almost have to wonder if Oklahoma State winning the Big 12 tournament potentially could have been a factor in this as well. And also, UCF made it to the semifinal while TCU did not.
Well, no, I agree, but I think the argument that some are saying is, why is TCU out and Kansas State in? Because Kansas State got bounced early. TCU got them head-to-head. Some people are pointing to the fact that in the RAC committee, which is a committee that sends out regional rankings, that was led by the Kansas State head coach. Those are politics there. Who knows? But it was very interesting because TCU had the better head-to-head. I think the other thing that helped UCF, because some UCF fans were upset that it was a double elimination format up until the semis and the championship game, so UCF lost in the semis. So you're like, oh, well, that's not fair. I actually think it helped UCF because you avoid a possibility of a second loss in the conference tournament. That might have knocked you out. You mentioned TCU. They lost twice in the Big 12 tournament. Kansas State lost twice in the Big 12 tournament. UCF only lost once. So I think all those factors helped UCF get in over those teams in that dog pile, if you will, of all those Big 12 teams, which even the committee chairperson discussed that afterwards as he was being asked questions by the media, Matt Strick of ESPN on television, and then some of the college baseball media after the fact.
Yes, I was thinking when we saw that the Big 12 had one less bid than we were expecting them to get, I immediately thought we've been talking all season about how this Big 12 is kind of almost self-cannibalizing each other in a way, and it's a wide open league. And unlike the SEC, where it's a wide open league mostly because of on pure talent, I think with the Big 12, it's more wide open in that each team kind of has its talents and flaws. That makes, a very, what's the word? I would say free for all of a conference. And so if the Big 12 were to lose a bid, that kind of shows that is indeed the case. And I think I remember we were talking about this off air. When East Carolina lost in the AAC tournament, we knew they were going to steal a bid from somebody. And I have a feeling now that we now know what that conference is.
Yes. Tulane winning the American tournament, ECU not winning it. I think that bid was cost TCU. I think the Big 12 was in place for 7 bids. That cost them a bid. Same thing happened in softball, Bryson, where
I'm not Trace.
You're not Trace. Everybody looks like him. Somebody tries to. Softball, I thought, ironically enough, was going to be a 6 to 7 bid league. Texas Tech, I thought, was in, but there was a scenario where the committee didn't pick Texas Tech. They went with Indiana, who made a run in the Big Ten tournament. So they snubbed, a team like Texas Tech. So very eerily similar on that. Nonetheless, baseball does end up with 6 bids from the Big 12, so let's not feel bad. Mark Etheridge of D1 Baseball gave a great stat. 22 out of the 34 at-large spots given in the college baseball by the committee was from either the SEC, the ACC, or the Big 12. Hello. There's a gap. There's a power 3 in college baseball, and there's a huge gap after that. And if you're UCF, the good news is you're one of those power 3 conferences with the Big 12. So 6-bid league for the Big 12. UCF does get in its last 4. Let's get into this regional a little bit now.
Well,
we've had quick.
Let's not forget to acknowledge the fact that finally baseball's back in the tournament for the first time since 2017. I don't think we've rightly acknowledged, taken a minute to appreciate that fact quite yet, because it has been a hot minute for this program that arguably should have honestly been in the tournament several times over before now. But
how ironic is that? Rich Wallace gets in as one of the last 4 in, when Greg Lovelady a couple of times in his era was one of the first 4 out. How cruel is that? How cruel is this sport can be? Imagine if Greg Lovelady makes it once or twice those times. If the ball, if it goes the other way, maybe he's still the coach here. I mean, that's how razor thin sometimes, things can be, and why these decisions are so massive that it could change a program for good or for bad or whatever. So, but you're right. It's first time since 2017. It's been a long drought. I don't even know now which sport even has the longest drought on campus. Is it men's hoops in 19, or who has the longest drought now that hasn't made the tournament, now that baseball's crossed this off the list? Is it men's hoops or women's hoops? Might be. No, women's hoops made it even after the 19, so it might be men's hoops maybe. Unless men's golf hasn't made it in a while.
No, men's golf has made it in the last I want to say 2 years. I'm actually thinking that as of this moment.
No, they did. You're right. A couple of years ago, men's golf made it as the last team in. You're right. A couple of years.
Yes, I am thinking more about, I believe it might be rowing, because because rowing, if you remember, has kind of experienced. Remember when Kim Cupini took over SMU, and they ended up starting kind of a charge to the top of the AAC, and so UCF and so I believe they haven't been in a win since 19. I want to say. So
spring of 19. All right, yeah, that's the drought. There's your drought.
Yeah, I think that might be the longest drought, if
fair enough.
A longest drought, but so you can look over that. Yeah,
that's fine. All right, let's talk about this regional. Now, UCF will play Alabama Friday night, 6:00. Interesting here. Alabama making the tournament back-to-back years, but doing it with different coaches. If you remember last year, Alabama had an interim coach, head coach, because the head coach last year was fired because they found that he was gambling and stuff like that. You remember who the head coach is, Bryson, now for Alabama in his first year? Rob Vaughn, who was the head coach at Maryland last year. Remember, Maryland last year played UCF in the non-conference. We were impressed with Rob Vaughn to the point, Bryson, where we had Rob Vaughn on our coaching candidate list when the baseball job opened for UCF. So that's Rob Vaughn is the head coach at Alabama in his first year. They've got a very talented team. They got a catcher who's a Johnny Bench semifinalist in the country, and they got a power hitter in Gage who's hit 18 home runs on the season. So it's a talented Alabama team that UCF will face. Florida State is the national seed. They're the number 8 seed. Link Jarrett, second-year head coach. The storyline very easily talking. Obviously, coached Rich Wallace. Rich Wallace was his assistant going back to Notre Dame when they made the World Series. He was the assistant last year at FSU. And then Stetson is the 4 seed. They won the ASUN tournament. They beat both UCF and FSU this year in the midweek. They have a program that's been to a super regional a few years ago when Logan Gilbert, the Seattle Mariner Major League Baseball star pitcher, was part of that Stetson Hatter team. Brian Murphy, our good friend, actually covered that DeLand Regional that year when Stetson got to the Supers. I think they lost to North Carolina in a super regional. So this is a pretty fun regional. It won't get a lot of national attention, but I think it'll get it's a very, very interesting regional from a local. And I would make the argument that all 4 teams here are capable of winning games and doing some damage. It would not shock me if any of these 4 teams got to the regional final. That's how much respect I have for all 4 teams in this bracket. Steve Trimper is the head coach at Stetson. In his 8th year at Stetson, took over for longtime legendary head coach Pete Dunn in the story. You were at the UCF media availability afterwards. What was the word Rich Wallace and maybe some players talking about this regional? What were some of the comments they said about this regional?
I think they just basically said they had to keep playing UCF baseball. Like, they know what they have to do. They've known what they've had to do this entire time. Rich Wallace came in here from day one and talking about, he has experience with this type of thing. And so now, let's do it. Now they're there. So this is their opportunity to take this program places it hasn't gone to in quite a while. Like, this is a place where, you think about people like Kyle Kramer. He's been playing college baseball since 2019, and he finally gets to go to an NCAA tournament for the first time. Andrew Brate has been with this UCF program since 2020, and he now gets to go to an NCAA tournament. You have these guys mixed with people like Jack Ziska, Danny Neary, who have that experience there in the NCAA tournament, and they've been kind of learning from each other. So I think the vibe is a vibe of, I want to say, confidence in a way, but at the same time, just staying true to what UCF baseball's been. Like, they know what UCF baseball is. They've known it this entire time. It's just a matter of sticking to UCF baseball and essentially riding it as far as it can take them.
Did Rich Wallace address the fact that Link Jarrett back in Tallahassee? I know Link Jarrett and his media availability did not. I don't think anybody asked him about Rich Wallace or UCF for that matter. Part of it is because that's not the first opponent. I'm sure those are questions that would get asked in a post-game setting if Florida State and UCF are matched up together during the weekend. But was there any comments from Rich Wallace about going back to Tallahassee?
In a sort of, yes. I think he wanted, if I remember right, one of them says, like, of course it had to work out this way type of thing with him, especially since this is his first year as a head coach after several years of working under Link Jarrett. He did mention that he hadn't had a chance to talk to him yet. I think because, like, everything that, because obviously, the media availability was at 1:30, which is about 30 minutes after the selection show ended. So with Link Jarrett doing his own media availability and Rich Wallace doing his, he kind of said, like, we haven't gotten a chance to text yet. But considering that he said he hadn't had a chance to text, I definitely think they are both very much aware of this fact, and that they will probably end up talking to each other. In fact, one thing that Link Jarrett actually did talk about is, I believe, one of his he knew another one of the coaches on one of the other teams, either Stetson or Alabama. I can't remember which one. So the college baseball world can be fairly tight knit, and so it seems like this is going to be a fairly tight knit regional. I would say.
Well, I would assume he knows Trimper from Stetson. They just played each other twice.
Yes, I believe it might have been the associate head coach of Alabama, Jackson, if I'm not mistaken, because he's
Jackson. Yeah, he's a recruiter.
Yeah, he's an FSU alum, just like Link is. So I believe I remember hearing they know each other. So this is I want to say a tight knit regional. And so while Link might not have mentioned Rich yet, I think they are still both very aware of the fact that they will be in the same city possibly for the first time since Rich left Tallahassee to take the UCF job. So I think the significance is not lost on them. It's just a matter of, are they going to play each other or not? And once that does happen, I'm sure that, there will be more thoughts on the matter from Link, who I think would probably be very impressed with what Rich has been able to do in just 1 year here at UCF.
I'm sure, and that'll be certainly discussed. He got a lot of interesting connections. Dom Stagliano, of course, who's going to be the Friday night guy more than likely for UCF against Alabama, came from Stetson last year, right? It was the year before last year started, came as a transfer to Stetson. So now he probably will not pitch against Stetson if they even play this weekend, but that's a storyline, right?
Yeah, they're in the same regional, but if Dom Stagliano is going to go up against Alabama, the only way he would be able to pitch against somebody like Texas is if he had a very short outing, which I highly doubt given the talent.
Now, if UCF were to play Florida State in the regional, Bryson, there are some familiar faces on the Florida State team that UCF knows very well, don't they?
Yes. So here's the thing. They're actually over the past offseason, 3 UCF players ended up transferring to FSU. So essentially we traded 3 players for Rich Wallace. So we ended up
that is a transaction. I love it.
I remember that there was this TikTok trade offer meme that I remember doing with it. Hilarious, and I can't believe they're going to be in the same region now. But anyway, so there was Cam Leiter, a starting pitcher, relief pitcher Jacob Marlowe, a lefty, and then shortstop Drew Farreau. Now, the pitchers actually ended up falling to medical issues, so it's quite possible so Cam Leiter, for instance, has actually been out since late March. We have not. He has been in rehab, so who knows if he's going to be in the rehab or not.
The talk was when I was in Tallahassee with softball 2 weeks ago. The talk around town, because I checked out a little bit of Florida State baseball against Georgia Tech. The talk was that they were hoping to have him back by now, either in the conference tournament or the regional, that if he did come back, he would be in relief.
All right. So potentially we'll see Cam Leiter, maybe not. Jacob Marlowe, I am going to put 99.9% of bets that we're not going to see him because he's actually been dealing with a much more major medical issue. The Tallahassee Democrat did an entire article about how he actually had to have 2 open heart surgeries over the span of about 5 days back in October because of an aortic valve regurgitation that he had. So it's a heart issue that he had. And so he's still working his way back, just trying to kind of, live a normal life. So things much bigger than baseball going on in the life of Jacob Marlowe right now. So I would say we're not going to see him. The one of the 3 nights I think we are definitely going to see is going to be Drew Farreau, who was a major contributor, for example, in the home runs that UCF hit last year, and was just a really all around great freshman player. He's started 47 of the 50 games he's played in this year. He's hit 308, and he has 10 stolen bases on the year. He's actually perfect, I believe, with stolen bases this year. He's second on the team in that stat. So Drew Farreau is still pretty much kind of I would argue is a very similar player to when he was with UCF was under him. Maybe not as much of a home run hitter as he was, but I would definitely put a lot on seeing Drew Farreau in that matchup. And it would be very interesting to see Drew Farreau stack up against the likes of Mikey Kluska. So, but those are the 3 nights that are the nights that end up going to FSU. I would definitely be keeping an eye on Drew Farreau. Potentially, maybe we might see Cam Leiter, depending on how his rehab is going.
It's going to be interesting. I will see. I think this is a fun regional. It's a stacked regional. It's exciting, to your point, to see UCF back on a baseball bracket in the NCAA tournament. As Rich Wallace said in the media availability when he talked to you guys, that their goal is to play in June.
Yeah.
And he wants this to be a normal thing. He actually says this is not he doesn't really want to be a celebration every time. It should be the expectation to play in June, which is what they used to be for the A-side.
I mean, considering just how close this program has gotten to the NCAA tournament since the last time it's been, like, this program has had the talent to make it, I think, for a lot. It's just for some reason or another, for whether it's health reasons or whatever, it just never materialized. And this year is just the year that it finally all worked out. And lo and behold, it's the first year that UCF is in the Big 12, which I think definitely plays a factor. Rich Wallace being on staff definitely plays a factor. Drew Thomas. I mean, I talked to Dom Stagliano about him, and he mentioned one of the big differences between the pitching last year and this year. If you remember last year, the pitching was atrocious. I believe it was a 5.80 ERA, something like that, just horrible. And now the ERA is now back to similar levels that it was on the 2022 squad, which included the likes of Connor Stain and Hunter Pattison, who were drafted in the MLB draft. And they didn't even pitch the whole season, by the way. So they kind of, I would argue, dragged the ERA down a lot more than maybe it had any right to be. So, Drew, I feel like that I think that what might have held UCF back these past few seasons in the last years of the Lovelady era was the pitching. And now that I feel like that with Drew Thomas as pitching coach, this pitching staff has been the best that it's ever been. And yet at the same time, of course, we still talk about pitching depth. But as Rich Wallace pointed out in his press conference, all teams kind of have that pitching depth issue or pitching depth issues and that type of stuff. So I'll be very interested to see how that plays out. And I feel like that with time, because obviously Coach they made the 2017 was the first year of the Lovelady era, and of course now we're in the first year of the Wallace era. But what I think is going to be the difference, and why I don't think that the same situation with the Lovelady era is going to repeat under Wallace, is that I feel like if he can retain Drew Thomas, or if Thomas ever does leave at some point, find another good pitching coach. And considering Wallace found him in the first place, I'd say he could find another good pitching coach as well if he has to. This pitching staff is finally going to have a consistent direction, be able to handle injuries better. I'm very excited to see what this pitching staff can do going forward, because already seeing the difference between last year and this year is just night and day.
We're going to have a lot more on this regional throughout the week on blackandgoldbanneret.com. We're going to try to get some interviews maybe during the week with some maybe baseball people to kind of help us preview more of this regional as we get closer to it this weekend in Tallahassee, Florida as well. You know, it's funny, me and Bryson did a bit of what do they call it? Twitter Spaces on Monday during the selection show.
I mean, I think it's just called Spaces now, but I mean, we'll call it
whatever.
Who cares about making Elon mad? We'll call it Twitter Spaces.
My first ever that I did, by the way, my new phone. So we seem to have a good turnout. We might try to do something like that after each UCF baseball game. We'll see. We haven't figured it out. Bryson's trying to figure out if he's going to be able to be up there in Tallahassee or not. We shall see. One last thing on baseball, then we're going to move on, because I know there's a couple other things you want to get into real quick before we end the show. Regardless of what happens in Tallahassee, this has been a successful year one for Rich Wallace. Agree?
Absolutely. I mean, even when you look at the talent that is leaving, there's still a lot more for Rich Wallace to work with here. Dom Stagliano, I believe, still has another year of eligibility. If I'm not mistaken. You have Dominic Castellano, who has really broken out this year. I mean, the revelation of Dominic Castellano has been insane. Chris Sosnowski has taken the closing role very well. There's several players that I think that can kind of use this momentum going in to next year. It's just that deep a squad. So you have that. You have the rotation of the pitching going, like we said, from night and day in terms of that. Just I think what ended up happening over this season is that you finally just added that secret sauce. Because if UCF addressed the health issues last year, then this year I think they addressed more of any lingering coaching issues that potentially had gone down. Mainly, I would say in the pitching department. The batting is a little bit different. They certainly have regressed in terms of homers, but I mean, last year was just.
I think that was by design. I don't think they wanted to depend on the home run. And I remember Rich Wallace telling us that in the fall. I think the bigger story is the pitching. Drew Thomas, the pitching coach, ERA went from a 5.8, I believe, in 23 to about a 4.4 this year. That's a heck of an improvement to, 1.4 runs improvement with a pitching staff that going into the season was very uncertain. A lot of questions when you consider you arguably lost your best arm to Florida State at the time in Cam Leiter. So I think that's the difference maker. The bullpen has been really solid for them. And a couple of guys have stepped up even late this year. Santala and Kramer carried the bullpen most of the year. Then Santala's kind of struggled lately, but you had guys like Sosnowski and Bauer pick up the slack, as well as Dom Castellano.
Well, I would say Castellano has been consistent the entire year. He's pitched the number of innings that this guy has pitched. He's pitching like I would say almost the same number of innings or close to it as a starter. He's pitched a lot.
Well, and I think he's a wild card in this regional. He is a wild card in this regional.
Absolutely.
And in that I'm really curious how Wallace and Drew Thomas will use him because of a regional format. Let's say they get in the losers bracket, they might use him as a starter instead of a reliever. You know what I mean? Or he might come in relief on Friday, for example. So he's a wild card to watch and seeing how they use him as a region.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the Big 12 tournament, if you remember, like when they end up going further in the bullpen, Wiley Hartley, by the way, great year. This isn't on him, but ever since his coming back from injury, he hasn't really exactly been the same pitcher. So that means we're basically back in the situation we almost kind of had at the beginning of the year, where the third starter is a little bit of a murky situation. You also have Chase Santala, who has certainly, did great in the beginning of the year, but has had his issues later on. And you see how much that bit them by using both of them back to back in that Oklahoma State game. So I think the big thing is with UCF is going to be, I feel like bullpen depth, even though, all schools are going to have their pitching depth issues. With the way that UCF's offense was, because I remember you sent me this thing. I believe it was like Friday starters or something like that. You saw that where they essentially compiled the rankings of all the regional teams, and you look at FSU and Alabama. They're in I want to say the top 100 in several key statistics in the offensive category. UCF, meanwhile, none of their the offensive stats that this table keep track of is in the top 100. Meanwhile, UCF pitching is ranked higher than Alabama. So with the way that UCF's offense can kind of be, it's going to be very important that Rich Wallace is able to maintain that pitching depth, because the offense might not be able to make up for it. And so if I'm him, I would Castellano, Sosnowski, and Bauer, maybe Kramer too. Kramer has certainly been able to maintain, I would say, his effectiveness a little bit better than Santala has been so far. So those four pitchers, you got to figure out a way how to make sure to not tire out those arms as much, because you're going to need those four guys, I would argue, the entire weekend.
Hitters Park, Dick Hauser Stadium, especially if you hit the ball to right field. It's very short, play short. So lefty hitters have a lot of success at that park. Keep that in mind. And from a lefty hitter standpoint, I expect a lot of offense in that park, especially if the weather's a certain way when it is this time of year. So, like I said, we'll have more on this on blackeaglebetteret.com the rest of the week going on here.
Well, you said a lefties park, right? You said a lefties park?
Potentially, if they hit it to right field, if you're good at hitting to right.
Well, you know who are lefties on this squad?
Yeah.
AJ Nessler,
Yep.
Lex Bodeker,
Yep.
Andrew Williamson, and also Danny Neary.
Yeah.
If I remember right, Danny Neary, one of the homers that he hit in that Cincinnati game was in right field. If I'm not mistaken.
I mean,
So,
maybe it was a long game. Yes.
I mean, could Danny this is interesting? Interesting if this is really like a lefty hitter's park. Could Danny Neary potentially be coming clutch yet again, or at least have an opportunity to do that? AJ Nessler too. He had that game-winning RBI against Oklahoma State.
Should be fun. Baseball regionals will have full coverage here on blackandgoldbanneret.com throughout. All right, let's switch gears here. We got a couple quick topics before we call it a show here, Bryson. It was a busy weekend in track and field. Some significant developments there for UCF track. Kind of give us an update on where we're at with that.
So the track team was in Lexington, Kentucky, Eric, for the NCAA East Regional. 5 athletes were able to qualify their way there. 3 of them will be advancing to the NCAA Outdoor Championships, and they are, I would say, the usual suspects. These were the big 3 of the UCF track team the entire year. They are no stranger at all to this championship. First, you know her, Renaya Jones. What else can I say about Renaya? She ended up tying a facility record in the 100-meter hurdles in Lexington that has stood since 1996. Now, of course, that was broken a couple of days later, so she wouldn't hold the record for long. But she did match it, which absolutely insane. She also ran her fastest time of the season at 12.72. She ended up running a bit of a slower time in her second run, but the fact that she was able to run a 12.72 in that first round right away, Renaya is not coming to play. She is focused exclusively on the 100-meter hurdles, which is a bit of a difference that we've seen from her in previous postseasons where she's tried to do the 200-meter dash and the 100-meter dash too. This is really much reminding me, Eric, of 2021, where she was much more focused on the 100-meter hurdles. And if you remember how that season ended, which was also an Olympic year, she finished in second place. So Renaya is certainly doing Renaya Jones' thing. She's back in the championship for the 4th consecutive time. I would argue that she is one of the defining athlete of this era of UCF track and field. At least I would say so if there wasn't also Ashira Collins in the picture. I'll tell you what, Eric. Ashira Collins, I would argue, has been the most underrated, sleepy good athlete that UCF has had over the course of this 4 times. Because if you remember back in 2021, it was just Ashira and Renaya at that championship. Ashira's also made it to the NCAA championship 4 times in the outdoor in triple jump. So she and Renaya have been there at the end of the season together every single year since 2021. It's just with Ashira, she's been constantly improving this whole time. I remember last year, she ended up getting 10th place in the triple jump, just under the top 9, that would advance to the final. She ended up in this triple jump, getting a 13.44 jump in the regional. That is her best triple jump of the entire season. I remember talking with our resident track and field expert Nick Porcelli. We always talk about peaking at the right time. Ashira Collins is really building up that momentum going into the NCAA Outdoor Championship like she has been this entire time. But that's not the only event she made it in. She also managed to qualify for the championship in the long jump for the first time in her career. This also means that she is the first UCF track and field athlete to qualify for the NCAA Outdoor Championship in 2 field events. I want to stress the say field because Jen Clayton did qualify for the long jump and I believe a relay event in the same year once. So this is 2 field events, triple jump and long jump. So we'll see Ashira Collins in 2 events in the NCAA Outdoor Tournament in Trackdown USA. And then to round out the field, Kaya Williams managed to advance in the 400-meter dash for the 2nd time in her career. She ended up running a 51.49 second time to advance. Both Kaya and Renaya, by the way, advanced to Eugene, Oregon, Trackdown USA, by being in the top 3 of their heat. So like there's the big Q, which is qualifying by position, and then little Q qualifying on next best time after that. So both Renaya and Kaya got big Qs to qualify themselves for to go to Eugene, Oregon for track. And you say the site, by the way, of the USA Olympic trials, which Renaya has qualified for. So long and short of it, the usual suspects are going to be back in Eugene, Oregon for the NCAA Outdoor Championship, and both, I would say, are running very well. But Renaya and Ashira, who have always been there these past 4 years, getting a chance to go there one final time. It'll be interesting to see what they can do in their last hurrah together in the NCAA Outdoor Championship. And Ashira, I would argue, is like really making a case to put herself right next to Renaya of like the dynamic duo of this UCF track era, I would argue, even though we've talked, Renaya's been the face of this entire time.
So that's the update on track. We'll have more on track as that kind of plays itself out as well to wrap up the athletic year.
That, by the way, so the NCAA Outdoor Championship is going to be held in Eugene, Oregon on June 5th through the 8th. So I will be certain to be keeping an eye on that as that happens.
And then lastly, some historic moment for women's golf as far as getting honored by a couple of the golfers.
Yes. So Molly Smith, true freshman, by the way, and Pempisa Sandwich Chasutham, who is a sophomore. Both of them, Eric, were named to the WGCA All-American Honorable Mention team recently. They are the third and fourth athlete UCF women's golfers ever to be given that All-American honor, Eric Lopez, and that would be great in and of itself. But the other aspect of this is this is the first time that Emily Marin has gotten a couple of All-Americans. Think about all of the amazing golfers that have been with that Emily Marin has coached her entire era. Ashley Holder, I think, chief among them. Even she could not end up winning or getting an All-American accolade. And these two both got one in the same year. Now, of course, Emily Marin has been here a long time. This is something that has eluded her this entire time. You know when the last time a UCF women's golfer got an All-American honor, Eric?
Go ahead.
Kristen Putman in 1995.
Probably should be in the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame, kind of a snub.
Oh, yeah.
Now, hold on. Let me clarify something. So I thought Holder was an All-American at some point.
She was. Well, if she was, it might have been either a Scholar All-American team or it wasn't with the WGCA. I can tell you that much. It's the WGCA has not had a UCF person elected to one of their Hall of Fame teams since Putman in 1995. Liz Early also was named there in 1990.
Another snub. If you're talking about UCF Hall of Fame, I might have to have a column, Bryson. We need to do a column this offseason once all the sports is done. Some UCF athletic snubs for the Hall of Fame. And I think we just mentioned two of them right there. That could be a nice content idea right there.
Oh, I think so. But I do believe so. But it goes to show you how hard it is to get selected for the All-American team, if a golfer like Ashley Holder, who won her American Athletic Conference Championship, could not do it.
I'm looking this up because we had Holder among the greatest female athletes when we did our off-season countdown. I'm pretty sure she was honored of some sort, and I'm looking this up because it's going to frustrate me now the rest of the week if I don't get to the bottom of this. Because I've always said Ashley Holder is the best golfer in the Emily Marin era, and maybe we'll have to have Emily Marin on at some point and see if that is still the case. With her.
Remember, these are the first golfers that Emily Marin has had as named All-Americans. So I think Molly Smith and Sandwich Chasutham are going to be battling it out for who is the best golfer of the Emily Marin era now. Though Pat Pitton has certainly made a good case as well in the clubhouse, given the golf that we've seen her play. So I think the big thing with these two getting this honor together in 1 year, though, is like, which also has never happened before, by the way. Only two UCF golfers getting not All-American, not honored in the same year, is that these are both underclassmen, Eric. Sandwich is a sophomore, Molly Smith is a freshman. Emily Marin has 2 more years with at least eligibility wise, has 2 more years with both of these women. So I mean, I remember talking about how this year could have been a golden opportunity for Emily Marin to make it to a championship. I think now over these next 2 years are going to be another case where, like, I think with both Smith and Sandwich, I think she has another golden opportunity over the next couple of years to get to a championship with both of them here. So I'm very interested to see what they're going to do. Oh, another thing with the both of them. So while the UCF women's golf season may be over, it doesn't mean the golf ends. Both Smith and Sandwich actually competed in the Bradenton qualifier for the U.S. Women's Open. And they actually both did really well. Molly Smith ended up not making it. I believe she finished 6th overall, if I'm not mistaken. She was pretty close, but she didn't make it. But Sandwich did. Sandwich finished 2nd in the qualifier and will be competing in the U.S. Women's Open starting on May 30th, actually. So as we're recording this, that's 3 days away. So we're going to see a UCF golfer compete in the U.S. Women's Open, Eric Lopez.
All right, I got the answer. It's been bothering me, and I have the answer now. Ashley Holder was a 3-time All-American honorable mention during her career at UCF. Honorable mention, 14, 15, 17.
Well, honorable mention, like how? Like, I don't think it was a WGCA.
It does not say, but it said that's what it was. Honorable mention back with whoever was doing the All-Americans back then, during that time. Which, who knows? That could be a different sponsor. It could have been a different All-American deal, but that's what it was said. The other thing let me ask real quick. Golf being in the Big 12, does that help a Molly Smith be an All-American versus if they were still in the American, for example?
Golf is a little bit different though, because the only difference being in the Big 12 makes as far as conferences go is that it just changes the conference championship you go to every year. The tournaments that you go to usually end up kind of the same. There are several like golf events that are that kind of more high tier programs do visit, like the Mercedes-Benz Intercollegiate, for example. But that's kind of that's sort of irregardless of the conference that you're in. So I think maybe the biggest thing that perhaps Molly Smith and Sandwich being in the Big 12 offered is that maybe it got more eyes on them because Big 12 is
that's my point, right? More
eyes on them, eyes on them, because obviously the Big 12 is a power league, and so
yes, that's my point.
Gets you more eyeballs. But I mean, you also look at the WGCA All-Americans that did get named this year. Because they just announced them 3 days ago. Anna Morgan from Furman, for example, was able to make it. You have there's one from San Jose State. It's not impossible, but looking at all of these, most of them.
It doesn't hurt. It gotta help you. It helps me more than hurt. Would you agree with that? It helps.
Yeah, I think it definitely does. It definitely does, because a vast majority of the All-Americans by the WGCA actually come from power league. The vast majority of them do, like the Power 5.
Yeah, I think it helps you separate. Real quick, which of the two has had the better year?
I would say Sandwich, because Molly Smith kind of had a bit of a dip later, a bit of a dip later on in the year. I mean, she is a true freshman, so stuff like that is kind of bound to happen, where she gets a little bit of the freshman the freshman. I want to say just getting used to things, longer seasons, that type of stuff. So I would definitely say that, that year under the belt that Sandwich was able to use was major in that advantage. she also, of course, I mean, she's the one that made the U.S. Women's Open, so that is certainly a good one to have. And they're both right close to each other in the scoreboard clipped rankings. The individual rankings, Molly Smith is actually 50 and Sandwich is 59. So they're like right there with each other. I just think that Sandwich just had a little bit of a better like midpoint of the year, because midpoint of the year, while Molly kind of ended up having a little bit of a struggle going into the Big 12 tournament. But she did find it again going into the Bermuda Run Regional, which I think shows that the type of talent that she has after struggling in the Big 12 championship, she was able to find herself again and finish in the top 15 in the NCAA regional. But Sandwich has been just very consistent the entire way through. So
that's an interesting debate, because you just talked about 4 female athletes that you can make an argument are the UCF Female Athlete of the Year. And that's going to be interesting I don't know how we're going to differentiate all that. But that's historic to be an All-American. Were they what? First team, second team? Is that how what was it again?
They were honorable mention. So
honorable mention. Okay. But still, first since Putnam. Putnam, when you're getting brought up with, Liz Early and company, you're doing pretty well. So.
Oh yes, and by the way, so Liz Early was, I believe, second team when she got on.
Yes.
Putnam was also honorable mention.
Again, 2 big snubs from the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame. We're gonna write that article. We got to do that. We're not gonna do the top 100 again, because that's a lot of work.
Oh, that's something that has to be. That's probably something that's going to be like an every few years thing.
Every couple of years, kind of like the World Cup, kind of like the Olympics. You wait, you kind of let it breathe a couple of years.
America,
but I could definitely see us doing maybe. Now, what we could do is we might do like a rankings of this year's athletes, current, like this year and the year they had, and we might do maybe some snubs of some of the athletes you just mentioned about not missing the Hall of Fame. All right, one more thing.
Every 2 years, that's my bad. But
my column. Check out columns I wrote about the senior class, legendary class for softball. 2 other great athletes that have been in these conversations before: Jada Cody, Shannon Doherty. I wrote an in-depth column there about their careers and why I think they will be in the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame in 7 to 10 years. I wrote about an article too about UCF football against Utah Black Friday night on Fox. We're going to get into football later this offseason, where I really want to just focus on the sports that are still going on. Once that's done, we'll definitely get back to more football talk matters, and certainly a lot of stuff that we have to get into with certainly the NCAA and the settlement between the conferences, and it's a wild west right now. But we'll get into more of that content in the off season, Bryson. All right, we're going to wrap it up because we want to enjoy the rest of this holiday. We're going to have more content throughout the week, getting ready for the baseball regionals. Check out the YouTube channel at Black and Go Banneret there. Check out all the social media platforms. Check out blackandgobanneret.com. We'll have the previews of the regionals. We'll have a breakdown of the regionals and much, much more. This was fun, Bryson.
Yes, it is. I'm very excited I'm actually very excited that track is not alone to wrap up the athletic year this year.
Look, a quiet, strong spring for UCF after a fall that, quite frankly, was not,
It was highs and lows.
Something like that. Baseball, softball make the tournament. Women's golf makes the tournament. Men's tennis makes the tournament, which, by the way, they have the number 3 recruiting class in the country. If you're into recruiting, I don't want to get into all that, but if you're number 3 recruiting class in a sport, take notice. So men's tennis is going to be just fine. I know, Bryson, you were worried about some people at the party, but I think they know what they're doing. So pretty strong spring, and really encouraging in this first historic year of UCF in the Big 12. So that'll do it for here on Night Shift. For Bryson Turner, I'm Eric Lopez. We'll talk to you later on this week and keep you updated on all the developments with UCF baseball in Tallahassee for the baseball regionals. This has been Night Shift.